work here. Inflation is life defined. So when you talk about inflation in the US, it's very different. The US bank reserves and everything can roll out measures. The citizens will feel it. In Nigeria, it defines, it's life and death.
Yes.
The person may not be able to afford drugs and medications and things like that. There's no social,
cushion.
But my fellowship also demanded certain, had requirements on me. I had to attend certain things, go deliver certain, presentations, undergo certain mentorship. So my time really was, for the first time, I understood the value of time and how to allot it and how not to waste any, because there are consequences. So it was beyond just the degree training, it was life training. I was being shaped as a leader in very, very comprehensive ways through that program. So those are the differences.
That's huge and actually life-altering differences. I mean, you see what happens here when like I've been in recruitment for quite a number of years now, and we say, there's an opening, we want fresh graduates to come in, and what I've discovered is not that there are no jobs. We don't have people qualified enough to take up those roles. That's the real problem. And why is that? There's that disconnect between what you learn in school academically and implementation of those things that you learn. It's almost like a big leap and there's a gap in between. How do you just leap over and become relevant? And so you find that the organizations that employ end up having to do some kind of training. If you want the best from those people, you still have to, like an interface kind of training to say, okay, you're coming from here, but hey, this is what obtains here, and you need to just have that plug-in at this point. If not, so I identify with what you're saying.
Another thing also, to give credit to Nigerian universities, or at least my experience in OAU specifically, is that I was very heavily involved in extracurricular activities. So OAU, especially in the Faculty of Law, has a lot of clubs and activities that students are not just that are really not just available to them, but are even almost a subtle requirement. So I was very active in, Prima Strata, which is a club that organizes law student debates. I was very active. I became the vice president of the Law Student Society. So there are many platforms. Now, in those platforms, you're engaging society to that extent. You're responsible to go and bring in resource people to come and deliver presentations, thought-provoking on topical issues of the day. You're handling budgets, you're defending budgets to the student association bodies and things like that. That in itself is training. It's
training, it's education.
Combining it with your timetable and your course requirements. So you're
learning to balance.
And you're learning leadership because you have to influence your exco's to choose the path with you. You have to convince the whole law student society. You have to be accountable. So all those things are also very essential. The only thing is that, and there you're in a way leading capstone, because when you deliver, it's almost like a capstone. But a lot of students pass through these institutions, and if by your own personality you're not, you don't have those aptitudes, or you're not inclined that way, you won't join those spaces.
It's the inclination that is the key. Most people have the aptitude.
Okay, so inclination, all this thing, incentives. The system should also incentivize it, right? Maybe grade it, maybe there should be incentives woven into it.
I agree with you. Grading gets the ears of any student prepped up. So when you say grading, everybody will sit up and
invite, job, like in the way in the schools in the past.
Job fairs.
Thank you. When you host those job fairs, and these are the candidates you give first privileges. That's another form of incentive.
Yeah.
So they are the first visible, recruits to the most attractive companies and things like that. Those are other ways to incentivize. These are things that are done like on the regular in all these other schools. Every week was a job fair. when I was doing my second master's. Every week you're presenting yourself, and you're not just showing them your grades. In fact, nobody cares about it. People care about what you do with the knowledge you have. So you need to be able to give them examples. So what helped was that I had already led initiatives back home. I had a nonprofit. I had raised funds for victims of the war in Darfur, in Sudan at the time. I had done things that at both national, regional, and global level indicated that I can move an idea from idea phase to execution, and that I can also solve problems. People want you to solve problems, and so the value is embedded in what problem are you particularly solving. Schools abroad, I think, they find ways to tailor that or create platforms so that thing that's happening in the classroom is being expressed, or that there's incentives that make you go and find things to express it, so that you're more in an advantageous position when you're out of school in the job market. Okay,
before I hand over to Adele, I just want you to hold one thought in your mind, ruminate on it, because you're going to regurgitate afterwards, and that's this. You've seen both worlds educationally, and you're in policy formulation. So what do you think needs to be done in terms of policy back home to take us to that level? Because without that, we can't really make progress. So chew on that and spit it out later. Yes. So I just want to conclude, based on everything we've said at this point now, or up to this point, education is not neutral. Education is not neutral. It either liberates or it limits. That's the summation of what we've just said now. Going by the example you gave from those two little girls, because that is reality, that's life. Education is not neutral. It is either it limits you or it liberates you.
And also stretching that neutral, that quote further, it also means that there's controllers motivating or shaping the education you're getting. You're within a system that wants certain outcomes. So the neutrality is also shaped, or lack of neutrality is shaped by that larger system. So the student is not the client, it's the product. So that classroom is feeding a client. Whether it's a governing system that wants certain outcomes, or a corporation-based driven system that wants certain outcomes, you go in there, you're processed, like a factory processes in mind, to come out with as a certain kind of mold, so that you can then feed the client. So no education is neutral, beyond whether it's liberating you or whatnot, but you have to be very sensitive to who's shaping the education you're getting, so that you then understand the world you're living in, who's controlling you, and to what extent are you being controlled.
This is very, very interesting, as far as I'm concerned. Okay, so over to you.
Bring it down a notch, in the sense that I want us to look at our internal systems, Nigeria, primary school, secondary school education, because those are the building blocks. That's the foundation of our whole policy. Now, I've been accused several times of him.
Just see, I've been accused. Can you imagine?
On this show, the whole world knows of lashing out and critically looking at the government and saying, hey, you guys can do better. And I said that because Nigeria has a way of celebrating stuff. Celebrate access to education, but the learning outcomes, and listening to what you just said, but learning outcomes still remain poor. So a lot of celebration on access, but the outcomes don't match what we're celebrating. So my question is, where are we getting it wrong, and how do we correct this?
I think at the end of the day, it's tied to the vision, behind it. The educational system feeds a political system, right? Now, so when you see schooling, I think his last question or comment segues us even into yours. Education is not neutral. Now, the kinds of we had informal systems of educating ourselves, and when you begin to examine African society, it produced what the controllers or leaders in that context wanted as an outcome. When we shifted to the post-colonial colonial structures, certain outcomes were desired by the African or by the colonies, right? They wanted people to administer the systems they had created, and so they built schooling as factories to produce that. So students, right from primary school, what was emphasized? English. English. In fact, they demonized your indigenous and modern
vernacular.
Speaking vernacular.
which still exists today. So that was the first thing. They wanted to assimilate the individual through language, right? And disconnect you from your cultural, foregrounds, right? So that primary school really emphasizes on literacy, numeracy, not even life skills. It's now that life skills even later came in. Yes. It was literacy and numeracy. Yes. And I think about my primary school education.
Yes.
Life skills to the extent that they taught me have a snake with a bite, this, that.
Really?
Or I'm just thinking about some of those home science things. They say boil your water. Okay. Those were certain, so those are to some extent, science distilled as life skills, right? But the emphasis was on math, because you can't, because the administrator needs to count. Yeah. And then literacy, can you read in the Englishman's language? When you move on to secondary school and then you're encountering the different subjects, you're encountering them to be able to come and administer the systems they created. So there was no way you talk about education being liberating. They, number one, disconnected you from your historical roots, even from your own context. So I think about all the nursery rhymes that I grew up with. I think about because I'm forming the mind.
I think one of those episodes we're going to just take a deep dive into
some of
those nursery rhymes. Do you know, a lot of them were actually even promoting violence. Anyway, don't let's go there. We've had that discussion.
A lot of people in the humanities even go and do they x-ray some of these things and what they're engendering, in terms of wide-scale human behavior. But the point is, the nursery rhyme, Jack and Jill went up the hill, London Bridge is falling down, Old Mother Hubbard, So I think it was through books that my parents did that I started reading about Anna and say the tortoise, the spider. But in all the nursery rhymes, in all the literacy English texts, I was encountering, ideas and constructs that were foreign. So I thought, this is where the abstraction begins. So the child and the classroom experience is just an abstraction. But in African context and African sites, they gave you the education that was related to the world and what you were supposed to do as an outcome. So whether you were in the Guild of the Arts and the sculptors, whether you were in the Guild of the Herbal Medical Professionals, they will introduce you to the flora and the fauna of the earth, because from it you must produce the medicines that must save, or whatever it is that you were understudying. It was linked to the earth, it was linked to, the village, right? But this one was abstract because they just needed to program this person to be able to hold a pen, read a memo, approve, not approve, you understand, and things like that. So it was an onward journey up until then. By the time I was in law school, as a law student, there were also studied customary laws, but it was almost like as a byline. Whereas that's the root. And I realized that most of us going through formal, we were the minority. The majority were shaped by customs at the ground. So it was critical that any African going through law needs to understand customary laws. And from Yoruba's cosmology or roots, from Igbo roots, from whatever roots of ethnicities they derive out of, right? But all my education was missing this link. Now, what also happens is that the child who you've imbued such knowledge in, but walks into the world and cannot connect it with the world, is just continuing that journey of disconnect. So you don't have a critical thinker who can solve the problem. So the person is seeing the problem, but just stranded. He's stranded. And thinking is a very laborious, and thinking is a methodical
But
task.
we're not taught to think.
You're not taught. My first encounter with thinking was in Logic 101. Another professor, we used to call him Jingo. He was a one-time...
I know Jingo.
You know Jingo? One-time, president of ASU, a chairman of ASU in Nigeria.
Very vibrant at that time.
That was the man that taught me to think, to break down ideas, unpack ideas, to premise them, to analyze each premise before you arrive at conclusion. This was my first thing. Apart from my home that prodded me, my parents, but in terms of formal thinking, right? This was the first idea. Now, a lot of the classroom experience does not. It does not that. It does not present that to the idea, because administrative education does not require. I don't need you to think. In fact, you're a problem to me when you think.
Yes.
I need you to mimic. I need you to imitate, replicate. I need you to suspend thinking. So that was the process.
It's almost cliche.
Yeah.
You're not paid to think. Who said you should think? Who told you to think?
And there's the aspect of protocols and certain protocols. In fact, certain formal professions need those protocols, but no education should, ever separate you from thinking. Medicine heavily relies on protocols. In fact, even law to rely because you're dealing with judicial precedent. So, but never at the expense of the individual being able to think. So this is the first foundational problem, is that the child goes through the classroom, but is never taught to think. And thinking, our children are capable of thinking right from birth. That is why a baby who goes and touches fire remembers that, and tomorrow when you present it, she thinks and knows that there's a consequence.
I'm not doing this again.
The capacity is inherent in the individual, right? So thinking is something that from the minute they enter the formal classroom, whatever age, whether it's early years or primary level, it has to be woven very deeply into every subject you're presenting. So when you present it, then you put them in a scenario where they think their way out of that scenario. Right? So these are the missing things foundationally in our education system. And the teacher behind that is a creature of rote memory. So it's not their fault. In fact, when you think about what's happening in our colleges of education, you realize that we're in a crisis. Because it will take a complete overhaul and a generation before you replace that person trained that way.
I quite agree. The question I always ask, who are those in the colleges of education? The people who couldn't get into the university,
there's that factor.
That's the major factor, really.
Today,
there are very few now these days. No, those days you had people who get up and say, I'm a teacher, I want to be a teacher. And right now, as far back as maybe late 80s, till now, nobody wakes up and says they want to go to College of Education. I tried JAMB, it didn't work. I tried to enter a polytechnic, I couldn't get in. So just go and then look at what the requirements are. 3 credits. So if you have not done so well, just come, we'll take you. So you are teaching somebody who's not excellent at academics to raise excellent children. Can you give what you don't have?
No.
Anyway, that's another conversation for another day.
No, you don't have you don't meet the cut-off mark of the course that you wanted to study in school, and then they say, what did they give you? So they gave me education.
Nigeria is making efforts, at least a lot of Africa, because of the policies that have been introduced through CESA. CESA is the Continental Education Strategy for Africa. We're currently in the newest strategic phase now. But a lot of countries that have adopted CESA have been going back to their curriculums to overhaul curriculums, driving at more competency-based curriculums.
So when are we going to do that in Nigeria?
So we do. I mean, recently, Honorable Minister Lausa, rolled out a new curriculum. The problem is the mismatch between the text of the curriculum and the structures and institutions and even the fiscal end of things to support the actual rollout and implementation of a curriculum. You're talking about complete teacher training overhauls.
Exactly.
You're talking about,
looking at the curriculum and the
labs, libraries, and reviving infrastructure to support those things. So a lot of things going. So it's not just, rolling out, sitting down with the curriculum experts and changing. It's so what goes
Okay, so I think this is the best time to ask you to spit out what I gave you earlier. So how does policy ensure that we don't have this jamboree of, hey, we're overhauling, we're doing this, we're doing that, and at the end of the day, it's still the same thing that we end up in? Because you're already pointing out certain things. The structure is not fitting what we're asking to change. Everything needs to be in sync. So how does policy drive and ensure that happens?
Policy is a powerful instrument for change and transformation because it lays out a plan and gives you a blueprint to execute a plan, right? It's usually well thought out. It's based on participatory consultation. It's based on heavy, deep research that understands the unique drivers of the problem, and then you now fashion out the, hypothetical. It's a hypothesis that this is, from the evidence before us, we go this route. This is where,
achieve,
we'll tweak a lever that will, change the outcome that we want. But at the end of the day, policy is not the first level of the transformation. It's a visionary leader. It's a system that envisions a different outcome for itself. A lot of policies, we have brilliant policies, right?
I've always said that. She doesn't agree.
No. That's what I know that Nigeria has policies. Okay. My problem is the implementation.
Well, I agreed on that.
But that implementation rests on a visionary leader.
Exactly.
When you think about the era we celebrate, the golden era we celebrate in Nigeria, or Southwest Nigeria specifically, the Awolowo era, Can you mention specific policies that Awolowo of blessed memory but you remember the leader?
Exactly.
Now this leader rolled out by virtue of policies.
Yeah.
When you think about Southwest economic transformation and big giant leaps, the cocoa, industrial, foundations of even architectural, so many things. Behind it were plans, blueprints, not popularized as policies we talk about.
No jamboree.
Plans. Yes. In fact, when you read his memoirs, when you read about the individual, the man, he was given to studying, to interacting, to planning, right? To deep thought. So he was a deep reflective scholar turned leader. So the great pillar behind these things, policies are critical, but because the envisioning process talks about the will, the courage, the foresight, all the sights, the insight, the foresight, the keen sight, the hindsight, all of those things are embedded in a policy that is backed by a